is a song that Brother Carl Smith wrote, and it just simply says, thank you. Come on, let me hear you clap your hands. Come on, do it again, everybody, clap your hands. So many things you have done for us. We can't thank you enough for your love, grace, and mercy. We can't thank you enough for your great and wonderful blessing. So many open doors for your truth and unmerited favor. We want to say come on, everybody, say so.
So many things you have done for us.
Come on, say we can't thank
We can't thank you enough
for your love,
for your love,
grace,
grace, and mercy.
We can't thank
We can't thank you enough
for your grace,
for your great and wonderful blessings.
so many
So many open doors
for your truth and
All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. We bless the name of the Lord and thank God for each and every one of you that have joined us tonight for our live Bible study encounter, our live Bible study experience. And we certainly bless the name of the Lord for your presence. As some of you all are witnessing, there's a storm moving out on the ocean, as the old saints were saying, and is moving this old way. And so if your soul ain't anchored, so all of you are seeing the storm that are moving through. So some of you may experience prayerfully not technical difficulties because of the storm that's moving through the area. But I'm pleased and excited that so many of you have joined us already tonight. I was on social media a few moments ago, thanking all of them for arriving so early. You know, it's so not typical of the Black church to arrive early to stuff. And so the only thing we arrive early to is funerals for whatever reason, but we don't arrive early to church. You know, for my pastor's anniversary next month, I may have a church comedy session where I just tell y'all about the church. These last 25 years I've served as a pastor, and the last 10 years at St. James. But ain't that like the Black church? I wouldn't trade it for nothing in the world, in the whole wide world. I love it with all of my heart. So glad that you all are here tonight. So if you're experiencing technical difficulties, you have to come out, come back in. Prayerfully, the storm will kind of move by. It's going to leave a little small cold front, but that's good. And it's been kind of hot lately, so that's a good thing for us. And so let me begin with word of prayer, and then I will give further instructions and highlights as we move forward. I see that Attorney Brooke Lewis is on tonight, and we are so excited that she's taking the time out of her sure enough busy schedule to be with us tonight. And so we're excited about that and grateful for her presence tonight. Certainly to Ryan Haygood, grateful to him as well. I know he's traveling, but I'm grateful that he gave us the best that the Institute has to offer. Not himself, but he gave us Brooke Lewis tonight. So I'm glad that he's done that and excited about that. Let us pray. Our God and our Father, how we bless you and thank you for this marvelous and wonderful day that you've allowed us to experience. God, you allowed us to start with devotion and prayer this morning. You allowed us to witness the rising of the sun, and now due to the storm, the going down of the same. But we're still alive, God, even in the midst of this COVID-19, this pandemic that just seemingly won't go away. But we thank you, God, that we are still among the living. And so, God, we thank you for the privilege of gathering tonight in this sacred space of virtual world, whether it be on Zoom tonight, whether it's on the St. James website, whether it's on the St. James app, YouTube channel, or even Facebook page and Zoom. We thank you that you are able, God, to come into all of those various technological venues and avenues, and your presence can be felt in that place. So God, we pray your blessings over us tonight as we come to the end of Policing in America in our sessions. And so God, we pray now that you will get the glory, that you will allow your presenter, Brooke Lewis, to present to us the sure enough truth, the uncensored truth tonight about policing in America. It is in Jesus' name that we pray, and all of God's children said, thank God, and said, amen. All right, there's Sister Francis talking about that thunder. I hear the thunder roaring out there. It's out there. My mama used to say, that's the Lord working. Go somewhere and be still. If it's thundering and lightning, just go somewhere and sit in a corner. I'm old enough now, I don't have to sit in a corner. So my mama was alive. She sure enough would want us on this Zoom and all this stuff with this thunderstorm going on. All right, it's 7:04. I want to present tonight Ms. Brooke Lewis, who is the Associate Counsel for Criminal Justice at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. I've had a wonderful relationship with Ryan Haygood, who is the leader of the Institute, and all the wonderful persons and the associate counsel and staff that supports him and that keeps the movement going. She currently serves as the independent monitoring team, overseeing reforms for the Newark Police Department. let me add a disclaimer because you never know who's watching. She's not here at that capacity tonight. I know I wear multiple hats, and one of those hats is on the side of the Newark police or public safety, but she's not wearing that hat, nor am I wearing that hat tonight. We are wearing the hat of just community leaders tonight, pastor and attorney. So I want to make sure we get that out there because I don't want my dear friend and frat brother Peter Harvey to think we're doing something illegal tonight. But I'm gonna deal with him on another level at a later date. She served as a law clerk also, and this is instrumental. All the lawyers that are part of our church and that are watching tonight, she served as a clerk at the New Jersey Superior Court Appellate Division. I've gotten a chance to really know the appellate division in my other hat and role as a parole board member, and them having to hear some of our cases and send the cases back or agree with some of the decisions we've made. But here's the best thing. Out of all of her wonderful resume, she's also served in the office of public defender. That's rare for a person to be this gifted and talented to spend some time as a public defender and in that office, in that capacity. That's major. So she's touched all the bases, literally. And so she is qualified, overqualified. All you Rutgers graduates on here, I know you're all gonna start waving off. We got some Rutgers law graduates at St. James. So I know you all are peacock proud because she's a graduate of Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey. So I'm glad tonight that she's taking time out of her schedule to come on. And so it is 7:06. I'll stop all this talking, and we're gonna allow Attorney Brooke Lewis to share with us, to present to us. And then, as you know, St. James, you put your questions in the chat area. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, we're able to bring that over, or I can see because I'm watching on Facebook as well as the numbers keep growing. Facebook, like, love, comment, share. Got it? Like, love, comment, share, so that everybody can catch what's going on tonight. All right, Attorney Brooke Lewis, thank you. It's yours. It's yours tonight. Thank you so much for coming on to share with us.
No, thank you so much, Pastor Slaughter, and thank you all of you for having me. That was a very generous introduction. And I think back to before the pandemic when you opened your doors to allow us to have one of these monitoring team forums to keep the community informed, which is so important. And again, thank you for always lifting up these issues and creating these platforms. It's definitely appreciated. So again, my name's Brooke Lewis. I'm Associate Counsel at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. For the last few years, a lot of my work has focused on policing advocacy. And there is so much going on in policing in our nation, but there's also a lot going on right here in New Jersey. A lot of the issues that we're talking about nationally are things that we can take action on here in the state. And so I hope we can kind of talk about these issues in light of what's going on in New Jersey, and then kind of talk about some next steps. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and thanks again for having me. So I think I'll share my screen now because I do have a slide. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great.
Yes.
So earlier this year, the Institute, we released our 2021-2022 action agenda, which really maps out our policy priorities to make Black lives really matter here in New Jersey. And, I do want to center tonight's discussion on policing, but I do think kind of zooming out to look at our racial justice work briefly is helpful because all of these issues are interrelated. So here on the screen, we see that Black residents in New Jersey face a whole host of racial disparities here in the state. And it really paints a picture of the systemic racism that we have here in New Jersey still. Because we're talking about policing, I'll point out the criminal justice ones. So we see here that statewide, Black residents are 3 times more likely to face police use of force than their white counterparts. Black children are 21 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. And this is true even though we know Black and white kids commit most offenses at similar rates. And Black adults are 12 times more likely to be incarcerated here in New Jersey. So to really try to tackle these inequities, we released an agenda that takes on a bunch of different issues. So we're looking to close the racial wealth gap, transform the youth justice system, keep our communities safe, ensure democracy for all, and repair the harms of racism. So tonight I'm hoping we can kind of look at some of the policing advocacy we've been doing. So as the pastor mentioned, since 2016, the Institute has served on the independent monitoring team that's overseeing reforms to the Newark Police Division as part of the federal consent decree. So we've been working on issues like community-oriented policing, bias-free policing, and community engagement. And our hope is that we're really centering the community at the heart of the reform process throughout. However, even as we're striving to really strengthen police accountability here in Newark through the consent decree and other processes, we think it's equally important that we're also rethinking policing as an institution and rethinking public safety and hoping to reduce the need for its footprint in our communities. So I think before we kind of start to dive into the work that's being done here in Newark with the Newark Police Division, I do think it's important to reflect on the history of policing here in the city, specifically the Newark Rebellion, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, but just to, give it the honor, which is an anniversary is coming up actually this summer. So on July 12, 1967, Newark residents protested the abuse of a Black cab driver named John W. Smith. And what had happened was that night, John Smith drove his cab around a double parked police car, and the police were offended by this. They asked him to stop. They then proceeded to pull him from his taxi, and they beat him. They then took him to the 4th precinct and continued to beat him. And it was these sorts of violent and racially discriminatory encounters with police, coupled with all the unequal access to economic and political resources, that really served to catalyze the Newark Rebellion. And just as it did in many other cities that year, and again, as we see today. And the toll was really staggering of the rebellion. So it left 26 people dead, over 700 people injured, and about $10 million in damages. But beyond these really tangible ramifications, in the aftermath of the rebellion, many people felt like the relationship between law enforcement and the community was beyond repair. So then we fast forward to 2010, and the ACLU of New Jersey petitioned the US Department of Justice, and they alleged widespread civil rights abuses perpetrated by the Newark Police Division. So this petition was granted, and the Department of Justice investigated the Newark Police. And then in 2014, they released their findings. And among these findings were that about 75% of police stops were unconstitutional. Over 20% of reported uses of force appeared to be unreasonable and excessive, and Black residents were more than twice as likely to be stopped than their white counterparts. So as a result of this investigation, the Department of Justice and the City of Newark, they entered into the current consent decree, which was finalized on May 5th, 2016, and it brings a series of much needed reforms to the Newark Police over a 5-year period. So next we see the consent decree is really comprehensive. It's definitely a document that addresses a lot of different areas. It looks at training, community engagement, stop searches and arrests, bias-free policing, use of force, body-worn cameras, property, data, complaint intake and investigation, and discipline. So, in all these different areas, NPD had to draft new policies, new trainings, and then they're going to be audited. And so that's the independent monitoring team's going to assess whether or not NPD is actually following these types of reforms on the ground. So next here, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done at the Institute here. Again, the disclaimer that I'm not speaking on behalf of the monitor, just kind of giving some information about some of the work that is ongoing and that's already been accomplished. So in the area of community-oriented policing, we've worked with NPD to develop their community-oriented policing policy. So it does a lot of things, but some of the main things it does is it really ensures that NPD is meeting regularly with community members to receive input and feedback. And it also requires the police division to evaluate complaints made against division members and then determine how community-oriented policing can be improved based on those complaints. We've also worked closely with NPD in developing a First Amendment policy. So this protects a resident's right to record police conduct, which we know is really important. We're also working to make sure NPD develops a comprehensive youth engagement strategy that will provide officers with instruction on how they should be interacting with young people in ways that are both trauma-informed and based on sound knowledge of youth development. Next, we also work on some of the community engagement efforts. So we work to ensure that residents are kept up to date on the status of consent decree reforms, and that they also have the opportunity to participate whenever possible. So this might include, hosting community forums, conducting the annual community survey, and creating opportunities for residents to provide feedback on draft policies and trainings. And then last, we also work on some of the bias-free policing work that's being done. So we've worked with NPD to develop a bias-free policing policy, and as well as a training, which really teaches officers methods for combating implicit bias. And we've also worked to develop an LGBTQIA community and police interactions policy, which will then provide instructions to officers on how they should be interacting with community members of the LGBTQIA community. So one final note on the consent decree work, if you're interested in learning more, or if you'd like to get involved in this process, we did create a consent decree toolkit, which provides sort of a general update on the consent decree and some concrete ways you can still participate. So that's available on our website. I'm also happy to share that with the pastor to kind of distribute if there's an interest in that. But yeah, we definitely hope that you stay engaged in this process, because I think it is a very concrete way to kind of make your voice heard and to hold police accountable right now. In terms of like where we are with that process, we're mostly in the auditing phase now. So there'll be a lot of forthcoming audit reports, which will really show whether or not NPD is following all these new reforms. So definitely stay tuned for that. So for the past several years, most of the Institute's policing work has focused on the consent decree process, and now we're seeking to sort of use this experience to advocate for much broader policing and public safety reforms statewide. So I think it's worth mentioning again, this very stark racial disparities our state has in our criminal justice system, because they really are staggering. So again, a Black child is 21 times more likely to be in prison in New Jersey than a white child. Black adults are 12 times more likely to be incarcerated than white adults, and a Black person is more than 3 times more likely to have police force used against them. So this is staggering, and it's totally unacceptable. So some things we want to do, one part of our work is about creating a culture of accountable policing. And there's a couple of ways that we are approaching this. So one is, like we mentioned, as part of the consent decree process, Newark created a First Amendment policy, and we'd like to see these policies be statewide. Yesterday, we actually released a policy brief urging our Attorney General to release a First Amendment statewide policy. Recently, the Attorney General revised our state's use of force policy, which is binding on every police department in the state. And we'd like to see him make a similar effort in the area of the right to record police. In the case of George Floyd, Daniela Frazier bravely stopped and recorded what was happening. And we have to wonder if we might not have even known about the case of George Floyd, but for her bravery. And we see more and more that people who bravely stop to record these tragic acts of police violence play a really critical role in holding police accountable. And so it's very important that we make sure there are statewide standards that protect your First Amendment right to record police, and that officers are aware of that right and they're trained on that right. Next, we also want to see our state ban and criminalize police use of chokeholds. So we actually, a year after George Floyd's murder, we still have not done that. So currently pending in the legislature is Assembly Bill 4284 and Senate Bill 2617. So both of these bills would make the use of chokeholds by law enforcement a first-degree crime that's punishable by up to 20 years in prison and or $200,000 fine. So when the Attorney General revised our use of force guidelines, they made sure that chokeholds actually are still allowed, but they're limited to instances of deadly force. But it's our view, definitely interested in other thoughts, but chokeholds have no place in modern policing. They're brutal, they're ineffective, officers aren't even trained on them, and so we need an outright ban here in the state, and we need to criminalize it to make sure that there's that extra layer of accountability. So we would really want to see the legislature and urge people to support their legislatures to pass those bills. We also want to see our state really limit military grade equipment available to local law enforcement agencies through the federal 1033 program. We see as law enforcement's response to protests, there's often all sorts of military equipment. And one way that they get military equipment is through this federal 1033 program. So we think New Jersey can start to help stop police militarization by increasing transparency around this 1033 program. So one thing we could do is the Attorney General's office should direct the Office of Emergency Management to, number one, review the 1033 program so we can understand how it's really impacting our state, as well as increase statewide oversight and transparency regarding the actual transfer of military equipment to local departments so that we can see and understand what departments are obtaining military equipment, for what purpose, and things like that. We also want to see our state strive to minimize the harmful effects of over-policing by reducing enforcement of non-serious offenses, particularly for youth. So our state did take a meaningful step toward reducing law enforcement's footprint with the recent Attorney General directive, which bolsters transparency around the use of station house adjustments, something that the Institute has advocated for since 2016. The directive, among other things, requires each state, county, and local law enforcement agency to report and collect data on the use of station house adjustments on a quarterly basis, and then to make that information publicly available. Lastly, we also work on some key reform efforts like ending qualified immunity. So at a high level, qualified immunity is basically a legal rule that very often prevents people from suing police officers who violate their civil rights. So we want to see New Jersey end qualified immunity just as Colorado has, New Mexico has, as well as New York City. We also want to support legislation that would create strong civilian complaint review boards through restoring subpoena powers and the ability to conduct concurrent investigations. We want to make sure municipalities have the power to create civilian oversight that actually has real powers to investigate what really happened. So, even as we're working towards all these reform efforts, we do think it's simultaneously important to also look for ways to invest in community-based public safety options. So this is about zooming out and realizing that when we talk about public safety, police should really just be one tool in our toolbox, that there's lots of things that make communities safe, and that we need to start taking those more seriously by investing in them. So one thing we can do is start developing mental and behavioral health first responder and crisis intervention systems that rely on highly trained professionals other than police to address certain crises. So in Oregon, for example, the CAHOOTS program has for 31 years provided 24/7 crisis intervention in situations that would otherwise be handled by law enforcement. We've also seen over the summer the STAR program in Denver, which was implemented as a pilot in June 2020, has shown really significant success in its first 6 months. They were able to actually respond to 748 calls without any need for police. And we can see that this is really important because I have this statistic up here, which is that people living with an untreated severe mental illness account for at least 1 in 4 of all fatal police interactions, which makes those with untreated severe mental illness 16 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter. So I think limiting the interactions between people experiencing mental health crises and law enforcement can be a really critical step in decreasing police violence. Another thing we need to do is really start investing in community-based services that empower communities like schools, hospitals, libraries, and parks. So if we're really serious about developing a community-based system of public safety, it's really critical that we invest in resources that support healthy and safe communities. Cities like Minneapolis and Boston have cut their police budgets to instead invest in important community resources like mental health services, economic development, violence prevention. And here in Newark, we see the Newark Community Street Team is a really highly successful community-based violence prevention program where Newark residents are trained in conflict de-escalation and resolution to reduce crime and violence in the community. There was actually an evaluation recently by UCLA that found that this type of program is highly effective. And I think it's the type of programs that we need to start investing in so that communities, residents, have the ability to keep themselves safe outside of law enforcement intervention. And we've actually seen in 2020 that Newark did really invest in this program. It recognized the success. And they reallocated 5% of the public safety budget to create the Office of Violence Prevention, which will now serve as the headquarters for the Newark Community Street Team. So I know that we're going to have a discussion, but I did just want to kind of close out the presentation here with a couple of action items. If people heard something they're really interested in working on, there are some concrete steps you can take. So you can contact your state legislatures to urge them to ban law enforcement chokeholds in New Jersey. So I have links up there. They're also available on our website. If you just enter your information, it'll automatically send a message to your legislature urging them to support this legislation. The same goes for the CCRB legislation. If you think it's important for municipalities to be able to create civilian review boards so that communities can independently investigate police misconduct, you can also take that link there or visit our website to contact your legislature. We also have our consent decree toolkit. If you'd like to learn more about what's going on with the toolkit, in addition to reaching out to me or the pastor, you can take a look at the toolkit and learn about where the consent decree stands and some ways you can still get involved. And then, of course, we have our Institute action agenda, which lays out really concrete things we can do here in New Jersey to really make serious racial justice and to make Black lives really matter. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to join the discussion.
All right, we're so grateful. Thank you, Attorney Brooke Lewis. Man, that was a lot of information, y'all. That was a lot of information. And we are indeed thankful so much for all of that wealth of information. Of course, you all can start now by putting your questions in the Zoom chat as well as on social media. And I'm watching Facebook now. As you all know, I've kind of become a talk show host through these series. And maybe I got another career in another field soon. In fact, our dentist, Dr. Cynthia Sutton, said, yeah, you might want to consider a role in that field of becoming a host on various talk shows or media outlets. And so I'll begin, Ms. Brooke Lewis, Attorney Lewis, while we are waiting to field some other questions. I have loads of questions to get us started. You mentioned qualified immunity and the George Floyd bill. Here we are, just celebrated yesterday the anniversary of George Floyd's death in Minnesota, and yet we have no bill in the Congress. And even here in the state of New Jersey, we have nothing, which I'll say more about and ask a question about in a minute surrounding the CCRB and even them trying to strip some of the teeth out of those citizen or civilian review boards. What is your position on qualified immunity and the George Floyd bill? Can you share that with us, your personal conviction?
Yeah, absolutely. So qualified immunity, it's been a problem for a long time. It's actually not something that people have just suddenly become concerned about. It's this really weird circular legal rule that says that unless the law was clearly established at the time, law enforcement isn't accountable, even if it turns out that it was against the law. It had to be clearly established, but it gets so granular that basically the plaintiff has to find a prior case that has the exact same facts of what they experienced, which, is not easy to do. And it has this sort of circular effect where if I can't bring a case unless there's an identical case that came before me, but there'll never be a case like mine until you let me bring my case in court. And so it's become this really dysfunctional, really unfair legal doctrine that leaves people without any sort of legal remedy when police violate serious civil rights. Police, it's easy to understand how they're not like other government employees. They have the ability to use force. They carry guns. And so oftentimes a lot of these rights, when they're violated, are very serious and people are left without any legal redress. And so I think, as we're at this reckoning now, people are really pointing that out. And that's why we do see New Jersey would not be the first to do this. Colorado has already eliminated, New Mexico has already eliminated, New York City, right, our neighbor just eliminated it. So I think it's a really easy next step for us to take. I think people do understand why, it's also not a law. I'll point out that this evolved through case law. This was created by judges through opinions. And so it's definitely, we would push the legislature to take action and to eliminate qualified immunity. For George Floyd's law, which would create a complete ban and criminalize chokeholds, that one is important. That's an easy step. And like you, I don't understand why we haven't taken action on that. If there's one thing, it could not be more obvious. I mean, that when you see how brutal that murder was, I don't know what more we would need to understand that this is something that is not acceptable and it's not part of modern policing. We also, like you hear, law enforcement's not trained on it either, which is also troubling, right? So it's like, why would we even create an opportunity or a legal defense, right? Because right now, the status of the laws in our state are that if deadly force is justified, then chokeholds are allowed. But we also understand that this isn't something that officers receive training on. So why would we create a legal justification for a practice that is not actually trained on in our state? And so again, we would not be the first state to do this. New York recently passed the Eric Garner Anti-Chokehold Act, which does something very similar by creating a complete ban and criminalization. And I think New Jersey needs to act.
Absolutely. And of course, on the national level, we have seen where, I guess, qualified immunity is a non-negotiable or non-starter for the Republicans. And of course, because of the Democrats' fear of going nuclear and just go ahead and just shoving it in, which I think they should do, because Mitch McConnell was in charge. That's exactly what he would do if his party was in charge at this time. I see a question in the chat about the bias-free policing. And as you know, one of the things that Newark has done, which is unlike any other municipality, and so I'm putting on the Newark hat a little bit, and you can go to our website and see what we've done in the area of LGBTQ. In fact, we have appointed and promoted an officer who is in charge of LGBTQ, and he is a part of that community, and he's responsible for training. The police bias has a lot to do with the arresting of transgenders and how you handle them in terms of who they are and the person that they are at this time. But I'll defer to the attorney. The question was about more detail on bias-free policing and the police policy on the LGBTQ, which we have one of the only lead detectives in the state that we just promoted for that reason.
Yeah, that's all right. And I think it's also important to add that, this process was community led. So NPD met with community stakeholders, members of the LGBTQIA community here in Newark, to really walk through what are the issues that are important in this community. So they created a policy out of that that's pretty comprehensive, that gives officers instruction on how to treat members of the LGBTQIA community with respect, about using proper pronouns, about not dead naming. We can definitely share the policy for everyone's review. And they're also in the process of now working with the community to create a training. But beyond that, there's also a bias-free policy, which explicitly prohibits bias-free policing. And they also have a training. And it really works on the science behind bias and really teaches officers how to combat not just the conscious biases they have, but also the implicit biases. So those are the biases that maybe they have that they're not even consciously aware of. So I'm wondering if I can share the consent decree website. There are all the policies that were created pursuant to the consent decree available. And I think everybody should take a look at those. Sorry, I don't want to hold everybody up. I was just hoping to share.
I'll go on to the next question.
Okay.
Another member has a question about the body cam. Is there a fine or charge, for an officer not producing the video because of not having the body cam? I know what we do in Newark, there is no such thing as an excuse for your body cam not working. So it ain't got nothing to do with no fine or no charge. You're looking at not having a job, period. So the body cam is made to be worn. But she asked the question, should police officers be able to get away with, for instance, my camera didn't work? What is your position on that in terms of Lewis?
Yeah, so definitely strengthening accountability on all of those things. Those things shouldn't happen, and when they do happen, they should be remedied. But also kind of speaking, I think, to the spirit of that question, that's kind of why we've really turned an eye towards protecting the First Amendment right of bystanders. Communities shouldn't necessarily have to rely on body cams. They should be able to hold law enforcement accountable themselves by recording. So if you see something, if you need to record a police interaction that you find concerning, or maybe even that you don't find concerning, that you just want to make it your personal practice to hold law enforcement accountable by recording the police interactions that you see, that First Amendment right should be protected. And we understand communities might have concerns about whether or not officers are following the rules. And, without addressing whether or not that's true, you should feel empowered to hold law enforcement accountable regardless. And one way to do that is to make sure that you're right to record them and hold them accountable, regardless of a body camera or not. And so that's why we're also pushing the state to take measures on that front as well.
Absolutely. And as we continue, always reiterate, I'm here as the pastor, not so much as the deputy director of the police department. I know how people can come and take little snippets of stuff. I've learned that already.
Same here, yes.
With you, that's right. You're here with this, that's right, because they will come and snatch it off. Now, this whole piece, and I tried to message Brother Craig Stanley, who I think is on here, because he attended a community meeting last night about the Civilian Review Board, and the fact that Rick Robertson, who is the chair of the Civilian Review Board, for the city of Newark, is a member of our church, is a member of St. James, as he is one of the lead persons in the NAACP. And we know now that legislation is stuck in the Assembly Committee. It has not gotten out. And there has not been any pressure applied to our assembly persons or to our senators. And what they're trying to do is basically strip the subpoena power. You might as well not have a review board if you're not going to have subpoena power. That's like having a dog with no teeth. You think I want a dog running around the house and the dog ain't got no teeth to bite? No, I want the dog to be able to bite. The dog got to be able to eat. You don't have to be able to use his gums to eat. And so they are holding all of this stuff up. And I see now they've been able to bring Brother Craig Stanley on. And I want Brother Craig Stanley just share with us briefly about that meeting last night. I was there as well. And what can be done, because Brooke Lewis talked about that in a presentation, the need for this review board, how it helps policing and betters policing. As you all know, Craig Stanley, one of our officers, a former assemblyman in the state of New Jersey, he lives and eats this stuff, so he knows it frontwards and backwards, and how they keep legislation held up that will make a difference for people of color. Brother Craig, do you mind sharing with us tonight what needs to be done to get this legislation through?
No, Pastor, I don't mind. Yeah, it was a good meeting. It was great seeing you there. Somebody asked me, "Am I okay?" I said, "I'm great. My pastor's here, so I'm fantastic." But yeah, it's troubling because the city of Newark, the mayor wants to have a civilian review board that has teeth to it, meaning it has subpoena power. It can subpoena people to testify and provide information. What good is having a civilian review board if you can't force people to testify and tell the truth? That's almost worse than having, that's almost worse than having a civilian review or having no civilian review board at all. You have to have that subpoena power. Now, there is And the city council voted to have a civilian review board with subpoena power. What happened was the Supreme Court of New Jersey struck down the city council and the mayor's wishes so that we could have that accountability on the civilian level, and said that the state has to provide a law. And so the state we have some very courageous young assembly people in New Jersey, assembly women, as a matter of fact, who were there last night. One was on a call, and the other one was there in person, who put together a piece of legislation. But now it's not but being held up by leadership in the assembly and the state senate. Or let me put it this way: it's not moving through. Now I shouldn't say it's being held up by anybody in particular, but the fact of the matter is it's not being put through. And so we need to make sure that we contact our assembly people and our state senators and let them know that we're in favor of this bill that will allow citizen review board with the power to subpoena and get the information, get to the bottom of what's going on. I know Ike has been in this battle brother Ike has been in this battle for a long time in terms of accountability by police departments and having citizens have the ability to hold law enforcement accountable. But these bills don't get passed unless we send the information to let our legislators know that we want to see these bills passed. So a lot of us don't live in Newark, but this is a statewide piece of legislation that would allow any municipality that decides that they want a civilian review board to have one with this power. So we all need to write our legislators, whoever they are, our state senators, our state assembly people, to make sure that they vote in favor and push let the speaker know, because it's the assembly people that let the speaker and let the Senate president know that these are things we need to have passed. So but that's where we're at. And nothing happens in Trenton without people getting behind it and people letting their legislators know. And this is one of those times. I was talking with Larry Ham last night. We can't afford to let this current climate pass and not get the kinds of reforms that Attorney General Lewis spoke about just now. I think is it I don't know whether that was the Attorney General or not, but to let the kind of reforms that we need to have pass. We have to make sure we take, George Floyd killing was a flashpoint, and now there's some momentum to get things done. In New Jersey, we've got to take advantage of this time right now and make sure that our legislators know we need these reforms here in the state of New Jersey right now.
Yes. Thank you, Brother Stanley. You're absolutely right. Here we are, one of the most progressive states in the union, quote, progressive. And yet here we are with our foot literally on this bill, so that this bill cannot go through as it needs to. And I hear you loud and clear. We can't let the moment pass us by and then sit around and wait for another moment to come and then try to push. No, it's like the gun laws. After every mass shooting, there's always rhetoric and rah-rah on both sides about gun laws, and then nothing ever gets done. And so this is where the church, brothers and sisters, you all that are listening tonight on all of these platforms, this is where the church is needed. This is the outside in church. This is where you got to be outside. You got to be calling the legislators. Attorney Brooke Lewis just posted in the chat. She gave you the contact information for every legislator so that you can call them and tell them, here's the bill. I need this CCRB bill to move. All of these legislators are up for election.
That's right.
And if we don't get it done by the middle of June, they are through until after the election. That's what we were told last night. They are literally through after June until the end of November, because they got to go and, I guess, politic and run their particular races. So nothing is going to get done if it don't get done now. Boy, I wish I was still out here on the streets. There's a way to get it done. And that's, I'm gonna have a little bird, a little pigeon to take some messages and drop it in certain places, show y'all how to get this thing done. You got to apply pressure. If you don't apply no pressure, you're not going to get what you want. And people sit up in the church all the time complaining, we ain't got this, we ain't got that, but you won't open your mouth. You won't go to a rally. You won't make a phone call. You won't email. That's how you change the face of everything that we're doing. I look at the mayor of Newark, our mayor was an advocate, activist turned politician. I mean, basically that's what he is. And so he still has it at the core of his being, an activist. And he, I mean, we got to do it, sisters and brothers. So thank you, Brother Stanley, for that information. Let me pose another question to Attorney Lewis. You mentioned these stats, which were astounding, that Blacks were 3 times more likely to face police force. And I've heard this. Charles Boyer has been on this over and over with me, say, Slaughter, this is a travesty, the amount of times. I got the data, I got the information on how many times police stop Blacks in comparison to whites and deal with use of force in comparison to whites. How do we change that, Attorney Lewis? That's my question. Legally, social justice, how do we change this?
So personally, I think the biggest impact we can have is actually shrinking law enforcement's footprint within our communities. And I think that's about, investing more in the community-based public safety options. I think that in a lot of ways we've over-relied on police, and, we keep investing in police, and it doesn't get us better outcomes. I heard somebody say yesterday that, you see all of this, people stopping people on traffic stops, right? Like they ticket a bunch of people, and then you see racial disparities in that. And the question stands, did anybody stop speeding? So you see this tremendous harm. Black and other communities of color are disproportionately harmed for over-policing, and we're not any safer for it. Would maybe a speed bump be more effective? And so it's about thinking a little bit more critically about public safety and what actually makes us safer. And I think we've for so long equated police with public safety, and it's not effective. And so I think, our state needs to take a real critical look about investing in resources that keep us safe. We can start creating non-police first responder models. Those are not a new idea. It's not a brand new idea that people are just coming up with. It's been operating in some places for over 30 years very effectively. They are able to respond to other highly trained professionals other than police to people experiencing mental health or behavioral health crisis to address, mental health concerns, addiction, transient housing. We also, I'll lift up again the Newark Community Street Team. They do an amazing job here in the city, and they make the city so much safer. And they're not police, and they're from and of the community. And so I think the most actionable step, the most long-term step, is about shrinking law enforcement's footprint. That can make a huge difference.
Yes. Thank you, Attorney Brooke Lewis. I see a question. Ms. Bernice Johnson is asking on social media. Sister Johnson, if you look above your comment, I'm talking to social media now, you will see where our communication team shared Attorney Brooke Lewis information, how to contact your legislators to support the CCRB. And if you click on that link, it'll give you all the numbers, everything that you need, and the bill number that you're asking for. It will even give you that. So just look above in the comment section. You'll be able to find the bill number. Attorney Brooke, what about, let me ask you this. And I hate to have, not hate, but I kind of dislike having to ask this question, but it is much needed. What should we do as people of color if we're pulled over by law enforcement?
Yeah, I don't have, I mean, that's a really hard question. the thing that I think is the hardest thing is that, and this is, I've heard law enforcement say this, is that even if what I do is wrong, you have to comply. Like I've heard, and the thing is that like your legal redress comes later. And that is what is so hard. I'll be honest, like I wouldn't even know how to give somebody advice if they encounter an abusive situation or how to keep yourself safe. It's a horrible situation. I hope that, I hope in my work, what I hope we do is that we create real accountability. So like what comes to my mind is like, I hope the more freedom people have to record in the community. So like if people know that, like if police officers know that somebody's recording them, a community member, or that qualified immunity is gone, and so that legal redress really will come, right? So that I don't have immunity to violate civil rights on a regular basis when I pull somebody over, that's how you get the real cultural change. But that is what's hard, is that, I understand that a lot of people are put in positions where they are, mistreated, and their options to get out of that situation are limited. And that is a reality.
I have a friend that's a Caucasian brother in this state, and he has biracial nieces and nephew. And so his nephew is pretty much Black because his father is Black. And of course, his mother is white, is Caucasian, and that's the sister of the Caucasian brother that I had this discussion with. And he said to me with tears in his eyes, and he comes from high area politics, very powerful gentleman in this state. And he says he has to say to his Black nephew, I can't say it because this is a church setting, but he pretty much says, do the F what they tell you to do. You just get home safe. And I promise you, if you get home safe, I deal with that so-and-so. And I deal with him that night before the morning comes. But that's only a rare instance because his uncle is very powerful white politician that can get that kind of justice before the morning comes. Think about the arrogance now. I'm not calling the brother arrogant because he's not arrogant by any sense of the imagination. But he basically said to me, if they ever, something of that magnitude happens where they do so-and-so to my nephew, they'll be fired by the morning. And I guarantee that 100%. I was like, wow, what if every Black had that kind of power?
Yeah. And I mean, I liked what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think it was an important point that the Attorney General, after George Floyd's case, made it clear that this is just legal justice, that real justice would be that George Floyd was alive today. And so I do, like as much as you want to hold police accountable for bad behavior, we also need to think seriously, like the bad behavior is not acceptable. And we need to get people to a point where, they're not choosing between like my dignity and getting home alive. And that's the issue, like we got to move past the conversation of how do we keep punishing bad behavior. The bad behavior is the issue. And
it's dehumanizing, to be real candid with you as a Black man. It's very dehumanizing. So talking about the behavior, we got 6 minutes and we'll be done. Talking about the behavior, how do we stop bad apples from going from one branch of police to another? How do we stop that?
Yeah, well, I'll say another bill that is, I do try to link it to things that we can really support. One thing that kind of gets at that is there's not transparency in New Jersey around police disciplinary records right now. And we're actually also, I didn't mention this earlier, but we're also supporting it's A5301 and Senate Bill 2656. And what these bills would do is they would make police disciplinary records transparent. You'd be able to request them through Oprah. And something other states do. And I think that's a big thing, right? I mean, and other professions, if a hairdresser, lawyers, plumbers, if you have a public complaint against you, the public has a right to know about it, right? Licensed professionals, people with special skills, whether or not, you have complaints against you is something that the public deserves to know. And, whether or not it's serious or important is up for the public to decide. But I think one of those issues, how do we make sure that, if there's because sometimes, right, like there's systemic issues, but there are also officers who repeatedly are doing misconduct. And how do not, right now, we rely on internal affairs and police departments to figure that out, but that's something that the public should be able to identify as well. So we also, I think a big part of that is creating more transparency around police discipline.
Absolutely. And I think Derek Chauvin is a perfect example. I mean, look at his record and look at his history. He was graduating to this moment. But now he's in a place, you gave those stats about incarcerations. He's in a place that's not favorable. I go to it every day, and I'm telling you, it's not the best place to be in. They couldn't pay me to go in that state. I'm nothing more than a visitor. And so that keeps a preacher living holy. I think every preacher needs to visit a jail. That's going to be one of the things I'm going to do as a chairman of the Board of Examiners. This is a side note, Attorney Lewis. I'm known for doing this. See, my mind, it'll shift real quick. So I'll get back right. My members are used to it. So I'll be right back to you. I think every preacher needs to go visit a jail. It'll keep them from stealing. It'll keep them from being crooked. If they go visit jail and find out that there's a place for you in there when you do illegal things and unlawful things in the church and with church money. All you need to visit, you got to visit a jail. And most cops, I'm wearing the pastor hat, not wearing my other hat. Most cops have never visited a jail. They don't know what East Jersey and Rahway looks like inside and smell like. They don't know what Northern State right here at the Newark Airport smell. They don't know what New Jersey State Prison going back there where the electric chair used to be in Trenton. They don't know what Garden State and Wagner and Ryan has done a good job. Jamestown and Wagner, those jails are now closed. People don't know what it feels like to hear them bars closed when you go in, even as a visitor. I mean, it feels like your heart pounds, literally going in there. It took me almost on 6 months as a member of parole board to get used to them things clinking. I used to tell the officer, don't you move. You make sure I get back out of here. I'm just visiting. I'm not here to stay. That's why I got this tie on and this badge. And they would always laugh because it's not a place to be. And it makes you also ask the question, I'm wearing my pastor hat. What does rehabilitation really look like? Is that what it looked like? So I'm not going to help Ryan with his argument, but I can help y'all a little bit. Let me ask one final question. I got so many over here. You talked about the Newark Community Street Team, and I cannot leave without a shout out to them and the other advocacy groups and anti-violence groups. Do you think, I know the answer, but I want to know your answer. Do you think that's what's making a tremendous difference in the city of Newark and the fact that it is being funded? When people hear defund is not saying we don't need police, we don't need police officers. The mayor did a good job the second week telling us about that. And last week, the activists, Boyer and Green, told us about that. It's not talking about stripping, it's talking about reimagining and shifting some of the money. And Brooke Lewis talked about it earlier. Do you think that is contributing to the success of Newark at this time?
Absolutely. And I think everybody, including our police officers here, would agree with that. They have been tremendously effective. And, like you mentioned, I'm glad to see that our city has invested in that and, honored the amazing public service they provide by actually putting money behind it. And, I love that you underscore that point, which, when people hear defund the police, they automatically feel like, oh no, like our public safety won't be taken care of, which is the exact opposite. I mean, in every other type of, government service, there's all sorts of evaluations about whether or not it's effective, and policing should be no different. Groups like the Community Street Team have done an amazing job in Newark, and I'm glad we're funding them, and I think we need to continue to fund them.
I think we will. That's another hat, but I think we will. I see Jason McPhail is on here. And I don't know if Jason is in an area he can talk. He's in law enforcement. If y'all can locate Jason, he's on his cell phone, Jason's 11 Pro Max. Communication team, can y'all locate him? Because I want to ask Jason, who is a trustee at our church, this question again, and maybe he can shed some light. Jason, what should our members do, especially, our young members, if they ever stop by law enforcement?
You guys addressed it perfectly. From the inside out, and whenever I've seen anybody on the street on my side doing it quote unquote wrong, whether it be demeanor or how they're treating the individual, survive the encounter. You're not going to win the fight on the street, because the culture is we can't lose. Wow. And we have no obligation to retreat. If it becomes an escalation, we're going to continue to escalate to as high as it can go, which that's never a good outcome. And that's the culture of it. That's what we believe in when we're going out there, because we believe that we got to go home safe. So even if we started the fight, we're still in belief that we're going to end it. So survive the encounter to the best of your ability. Try your very best to comply. Respect goes a long way. We have body cameras. We were one of the first departments in the state to have them. There's no such thing as turning it off or it don't work or none of that. Like, you're in enormous trouble if that were the case. Unless it malfunctions itself, but they're held on to our clothes. So I did want to say, like, just to be fair, if somebody snatches it and rips it off the pocket or off the magnet, some of us have a magnet, it's pretty tough, but it does come off. It's not permanent. So if I fall down, it will come off. Yeah. So, just to be fair about it, that's not something that's regular or anything like that. Just to keep it fair. The more cops there is probably a good thing, because everybody's got on the camera.
Yeah. But what I love about it, and we got to go, we're over time now, is the statement you just made. When you've seen wrong as an officer and another officer was doing it, you've addressed it. I think that has a great, we cannot underscore the greatness of that, and officers addressing other officers and saying, no, that's not how we do it. No, that's not how we talk to that person. That person's a human. That person's an individual. No, you did it wrong. If we had more of that, and that's where they talk about this whole blue wall thing, and that the blue wall came collapsing in Minnesota when the chief went up there, when the senior veteran went up there and said, no, Chauvin was wrong. That's not who we are. That's not how we do it. Right. I think we're starting to see more of that. And so, McPhail, thank you so much for your contribution. I pray your safety all the time, sir, out there on the street.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I just want to throw this in there that, like we are human too. There's more of us than not, but we don't get the shine for doing the right thing. It's only the guys that do bad that get the attention. There's a lot of us out there that care and go above and beyond to do the right thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And I've seen that already. And it's more of you than it is of them. I can tell you. Yes, sir. For sure. So thank you so much. Y'all see that? That's firsthand from law enforcement on how, survive the encounter, just get out of the situation. Some officers are not good at de-escalation. He's one of them that's good at de-escalation. And so officers are being trained now to de-escalate. Brooke Lewis talked about sending out, street teams and community. We got the ambassadors program in Newark. We get ready to open the academy. I'm in a command meeting yesterday. We got hundreds of applications for the academy already, and we can't even open it till September because we open it in the fall. Hundreds of applications. This is the Citizen Clergy Academy, and it's already loaded up. So we got to create spaces just to get all these people in. And we ain't even sent out information about the ambassador program, which is coming up. So I'm excited about
Pastor, can I throw one more thing in there?
Yes, sir.
The New Jersey state has a program that the FBI got involved in. It's called NJCIT, Crisis Intervention Team. It's a cross training with mental health professionals to officers. My city, Linden, is one of the first ones with more than 50% of our officers are trained on mental health and crisis intervention. And they're trying to roll it out across the country, but it just started within the last few years. They have it in Union County's Academy as a mandatory class, but they're trying to get the other counties involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we heard the mayor talk about this, and even O'Hara and Sproul directors talk about their trauma teams and their social workers that are part of law enforcement now in the training that they're getting. So, hey, this has been an awesome night. I think the key tonight, once again, y'all, survive the encounter, respectful. My daughter's getting ready to learn how to drive. I'm coming to grips with that, with Kellen going out. I've been pulled over. I have a bad habit of driving too fast. So I've been pulled over, and I guess when they read the plate, somehow they were like, this is Slaughter guy. All right. Pastor, slow it down. Director, slow it down. Everybody don't get that kind of treatment, So, but I'm respectful. And if someone is disrespectful of me, I just sit there and I just, yeah, okay. Because everybody don't know your name. So, I think my friend was right. I think Jason McPhail was right. Be respectful. And like Brooke Lewis said, sad that we got to say survive the encounter. It's sad that we got, so someday we got to get it to that point. And like she said, when you get rid of qualified immunity and you start dealing with subpoena power and transparency of these people moving from department, you're going to start seeing a different level of respect when you're having traffic stops and all of that stuff. And that's a whole nother thing you touched about, but we ain't got time. It's 8:06. These traffic stops sometimes unnecessary, but we know it's a good part of the state budget. So, the state police need to make their salary, so they need to pull you over on the turnpike and all that stuff. But hey, I'm on the side of law enforcement. I'm on the community side. I see both sides. And it's a fine line and a different dynamic. Thank you all tonight. Come on, let's give a virtual appreciation to Brooke Lewis, Attorney Brooke Lewis, everybody. Let's give a virtual appreciation. Facebook, we can't see y'all, but we know y'all clapping over there too as we give virtual. Website, we can't see y'all, but I know y'all clapping. YouTube, I know y'all clapping. Thank you, Attorney Brooke Lewis. You were phenomenal. Thank you for lending yourself to us tonight. Let me speak blessings over you all tonight. Hey, tomorrow, I don't know how I'm gonna do all this, but I'm supposed to be everywhere at the same time, but I'm gonna figure it out. Tomorrow, I'm with the African American Chamber of Commerce and with these top physicians and health people dealing with COVID-19 and the vaccine and all of that stuff. I think that starts at 12:30. They moved the time to try to accommodate me on tomorrow. So I want you all, Melissa, send that out probably in a blast if she can. I think she shared the flyer earlier. So y'all pray, there it is right there. If you need that information, y'all hit Melissa up or hit the church up on Facebook, and we'll be able to get you all that information. So let me speak blessings over you all. Thank you. Hey, we got a surprise for you all, but I can't tell you yet because the leaders are working on pulling something off that I gave to them earlier this week. So I don't want to ruin it until they start giving me a report, Brother Sneed, that we can pull it off. Brother Peterman, Kyle, Barbara, that we can pull it off. But it's going to be bananas if we can pull it off. Y'all trust me on this. It's going to be bananas. Hey, we're celebrating 10 years of marriage between pastor and people. It's 2 weeks away now. This is the 5th Sunday month. That's right. Never mind. That's second Sunday in June. We celebrate the anniversary of drive-through. Y'all better be at that drive-through because you can't hide behind Zoom. I want to see your face. If you've been vaccinated, take your mask off. I ain't seen y'all in a year. In 15 months, I want to see what y'all look like. I want to know the people that God has blessed me to be able to pastor. So y'all make sure y'all come to that drive-through on June the 13th. It ain't about no gifts, ain't about no money. I want to see y'all. I want to see you all. So, and make sure you take the mask off if you're vaccinated. If you ain't vaccinated, keep that mask on. Because you know what y'all did last year. Y'all went down the street, parked, got out, and it was full. Now you can get away with it this year though, because they taking the limit off of all of that stuff. But I want to see y'all, and I thank God for the committee. The logo is bananas. Ron Barkley, man, the committee got the logo together. I'm trying to get something to wear for that Sunday. I told my God I want the logo in my jacket. You know, man, that logo bad. We're gonna post the logo. Hey, Melissa, you got the logo? I know it's 8:10, but it's storming. They ain't got nowhere to go but to go to bed. Show the logo, Melissa, if you can. Can you screen share? Facebook still over there. I love y'all. Y'all still over there. I love y'all. Melissa, where the logo? Did Melissa leave?
1 minute, Pastor. 1 minute. It's coming.
While it's coming, I want to see y'all. That's what I want to do. I want to see y'all. And I can see y'all in June. Got a surprise in July. I'm busy to see all y'all. Got a surprise, but I got to wait until they do all the fine tuning. And I'll let y'all know what the surprise is. All right. Is Luce Powell on here tonight? I didn't see Brother Powell. I have to call him. All right. Y'all see that logo? Man, that's bad. That's bad, man. That committee is bad. That Ron Barkley bad, ain't he? That's the best colors in the whole wide world. Them the best colors. Man, I don't know what to do myself. 10 years, that's a decade of ministry. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right, unmute everybody. We getting ready to go. God bless you and God keep you. May God's face shine upon each and every one of you. And I pray above all, that God be gracious unto you. You're a supernova. Y'all going out there and shine. Everybody going and shine, 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 shine. All right, let's unmute everybody. I needed that favor last week on speeding ticket. I don't know nothing about no favors on speeding ticket. I'm part of the law. I don't know nothing about those. I don't know nothing about those. Where were you at, Sister Rutherford? Let's unmute everybody.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Tony Brooks.
Hi, Paula.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Melissa.
Good night.
Good night.
Nice.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Stop that.
The sleeve.
Hey.
My shots.
Hey, Carl.
Peterman.
Hey, Brother Peterman.
Hey,
Brother
Sidney.
James, everyone.
Hey,
Hi.
Linda.
Hey,
hey,
Grace.
sleeves. I got both my shots. I'm done.
Yeah.
How you doing? How you doing, darling?
How you, Anthony? Where's
I'm
Linda?
doing well. Oh, she had to work late today, dear.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Y'all have
Everybody.
y'all have a good night.
Have a good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night, family. I miss Gracie.
Good night.
Hi.
I'm all vaccinated now, Doc. I'm ready. Hey, Doc, I'm all vaccinated. I'm ready now.
I miss Gracie.
All right.
Hi.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Miss Rosie is at my mom's computer.
Hey, Veronica.
Hi, Stevie.
I see you. I told you I've been seeing
There
you all
you
night. Hi, Lula.
Right?
Paula.
Hi, baby.